We have all been on the receiving end of a terrible apology. You know, the exact one I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. The classic non-apology.
Right. Someone looks you dead in the eye and says, I'm sorry you feel that way, or like, I apologize if anyone was offended.
Yeah, which just, it leaves you feeling worse than if they had just stayed quiet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you know instinctively they aren't actually sorry about what they did. They're just, annoyed that they have to deal with your reaction.
They're managing the PR of the situation.
Yeah, it's PR. And ruined trust is just, it's one of the most agonizing human experiences. Figuring out who is actually willing to repair it can be incredibly confusing.
That's a minefield, really.
It totally is. So today we are going to explore what I think is the ultimate blueprint for navigating that exact scenario.
A literal masterclass in conflict resolution.
Yes. But before we get into the weeds of today's deep dive, I want to take a really brief moment to welcome you, the listener, and offer a genuine divine blessing for your day and for your entire week ahead. May you find peace, clarity, and, a profound sense of purpose in whatever challenges or tough conversations you're stepping into right now.
That is a really fitting way to begin,
Yeah.
especially considering the heavy weight of the material we have on the desk today.
For sure. So what are we looking at?
Well, we are pulling insights from two really highly regarded study texts. We've got the Holman Study Bible and the NWA, which is the Nova Almeida Actualizada Study Bible.
Nice.
Yeah, and we're going deep specifically into chapter 7 of the Apostle Paul's second letter to the Corinthians.
Okay, and I want to frame this for you listening right now. Please do not tune out just because we're talking about an ancient theological text.
Right, it's not just dusty history.
No, not at all. What we are looking at is fundamentally a psychological masterclass. It strips down the exact anatomy of a fake apology versus a genuine one.
It really does. It's incredibly practical.
Yeah, whether you are navigating a strained marriage or dealing with a toxic workplace dynamic or trying to rebuild a friendship after a massive betrayal, the mechanics of conflict resolution mapped out here are just staggering.
Staggering is the right word. But, to understand the mechanics, we first really have to understand the stakes.
Let's set the stage for us. What's happening in Corinth?
So the Holman study notes set this up perfectly for the first few verses of chapter 7. Paul is writing to this community in Corinth, right? A group he literally helped establish with his own two hands.
He invested his life into these people.
Exactly. But the relationship has deteriorated severely.
You're talking about a full-blown crisis of trust here.
A massive crisis. The notes detail that they call them false apostles, had basically moved into the Corinthian community.
Like infiltrators.
Pretty much. And these individuals were actively campaigning against Paul. They were attempting to persuade the Corinthians that he was, well, essentially a grifter.
Wow, a grifter.
Yeah. The accusation was that Paul was exploiting the community, corrupting them, and basically using his ministry for his own financial profit.
That is a profound level of betrayal. Think about it. You spend years pouring your energy, your love, your own resources into a community.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Right. And the moment you leave, they start entertaining rumors that you were just scamming them the whole time.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. And the natural human instinct there is to either get deeply defensive or just, cut ties and walk away completely.
Burn the bridge.
Exactly. But Paul doesn't do that.
No, he does neither of those things. Before he even begins to untangle the mess of these accusations, he makes this highly strategic move.
What does he do?
He establishes a baseline of just deep, unshakable affection. Like right away in verses 2 and 3, he tells them, make room in your hearts for us.
Oh.
Yeah, he explicitly states he is not condemning them. He actually says they are in his heart to, quote, die together and to live together.
Okay, I'm trying to picture how that plays out in reality.
Yeah.
Because he leads with this intense statement of solidarity, right?
Right. He's laying a foundation of love.
But then, literally, in the very first verse of this chapter, he urges them to, and I'm going to read this right from the text, to purify ourselves from everything that contaminates body and spirit, perfecting holiness out of reverence for God.
It's a strong pivot.
It's a massive pivot. I have to stop there because it feels so jarring. He goes from, I love you enough to die with you, to this incredibly intimidating demand about purification and the fear of God.
Yeah, it sounds harsh to our modern ears.
Totally. If a manager pulls me into a room to tell me, they value me as an employee and I'm part of the family, but then it immediately starts talking about purifying my actions with fear, my walls are going right back up.
Oh, instantly. You'd be looking for the door.
Exactly. So how does that intense, intimidating language serve a relational appeal?
Well, that tension is completely intentional, and the NAA study notes provide a really crucial lens for this. They point out that the phrase fear of God here is, it's frequently misunderstood.
Okay, how so?
It is not about towering in terror or panic, like God is waiting to strike you with lightning.
Right.
The notes actually define it as reverent obedience. It is framed as the foundational path of wisdom for a believer.
Interesting. So if it's not terror, what is the psychological mechanism at play there? Why anchor a conflict resolution in reverent obedience?
Because true relationship requires a clean environment.
A clean environment. I like that.
Yeah, the notes connect this to the concept of sanctification, which is just the ongoing process of growth in holiness.
Okay.
And this process isn't just about, religious rituals. It involves how believers use their physical bodies, their inner thoughts, their deep desires.
So it's holistic.
Entirely. Paul is basically telling them that sweeping this massive betrayal under the rug just isn't an option. You cannot have a healthy, intimate relationship if the environment is contaminated by suspicion and lies and unresolved toxicity.
Okay, that makes so much sense. It's less like a manager dropping a hammer and more like, I don't know, a surgeon prepping for a major operation.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. The surgeon might care about the patient deeply, like they want to save their life, but they are still going to scrub their hands aggressively and demand a completely sterile operating room.
They have to. It's life or death.
Exactly. So the fear of God, or this reverent obedience, is the sterile environment. You cannot operate on fractured relationship with dirty hands.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. You need clean hands. And, setting up that sterile environment, demanding that level of total honesty, it took an immense toll on Paul.
I bet. It's exhausting.
It really is. And when we move to verse 5, we see the very real human cost of this conflict.
Yeah, the vulnerability in this part of the text is just striking. Paul describes arriving in the region of Macedonia, and he writes that his flesh had no rest.
None at all.
The Holman notes highlight this exact phrase he uses. Conflicts on the outside, fears within.
Yeah, fears within.
This isn't just a brief moment of worry or a stressful Tuesday. He is describing agonizing physical anxiety. He is losing sleep over whether or not the Corinthian community is going to totally reject him.
Which ironically proves his earlier point.
How so?
You do not experience fears within for people you are merely trying to exploit.
Oh, wow. That's a great point.
Right. That level of emotional affliction only comes when you deeply, genuinely love the people who might be walking away from you. A grifter wouldn't care this much.
A grifter would just move on to the next mark.
Exactly. But the text doesn't leave him in that terrible distress. Verse 6 states that God, who comforts the downcast, brought comfort to Paul.
And the way that comfort arrives is fascinating to me. Because, when I read that a divine being comforted someone in ancient literature, I expect, like, the sky to part.
Choirs of angels singing?
Yeah. I expect a mystical vision or this overwhelming supernatural sense of peace to just drop into his mind from the heavens.
But that's not what happens. The study notes draw very specific attention to the how of this divine comfort.
Right.
God uses human agents. The relief didn't come as a mystical feeling. It arrived when Paul's friend and coworker, Titus, literally just walked through the door.
God gave him a guy walking through a door.
Yep. Just a friend showing up.
There is something so profoundly grounding about that. When we're going through a crisis, when you're the one sitting there with conflicts on the outside and fears within, you often pray for a miracle to take the pain away.
We all want the supernatural fix.
We do. But this text suggests that divine comfort is often highly practical. It looks like a friend showing up with a cup of coffee at the exact right time.
Or a coworker just sitting with you in the mess. And, Titus didn't just bring his physical presence, he brought crucial news.
Right, he had an update.
He did. He reported on the Corinthians' deep longing, their sorrow, and their zeal for Paul.
Which had to be the ultimate lifeline Paul was waiting for. Because chronologically, he had just taken a massive relational gamble.
He really had. In verse 8, Paul references this severe letter he had previously sent to the Corinthians.
The severe letter.
Yeah, this letter is actually lost to history, so we don't have the text, but we know it was harsh. It was a direct, unapologetic confrontation of their behavior.
He called them out.
He did. And Paul even admits a moment of deep vulnerability here. He says he temporarily regretted sending it because he knew it caused them pain.
And the Greek word for that pain is highlighted heavily in the study text, right?
Yes. The word is lupe.
Lupe, lupe.
Exactly. And lupe is a really significant concept. The Holman notes explain that it translates to pain, affliction, or distress.
So it's a strong word.
Very strong. While it can mean physical pain, in the New Testament, where it actually appears 26 times, it almost always refers to intense mental and emotional anguish.
So it's not just feeling a bit down or having a bad day. It is a heavy, crushing distress.
Yes. In other letters, Paul uses lupe to describe the overwhelming tragedy of Israel's unbelief, or the profound sorrow of almost losing a close friend to a fatal illness.
Wow.
So it is a highly negative state. But here in chapter 7, the usage flips completely.
How so?
He discusses how this severe grief, this lupe, if processed through the right mechanism, can actually motivate a joyful heart toward God.
Okay, I have to challenge that a bit, because our modern instinct is to avoid causing distress at all costs.
Right, keep the peace.
Yeah. If you love someone, you are supposed to protect them from mental and emotional anguish, not inflict it on them. Sending a severe letter that causes lupe seems completely counterproductive to rebuilding a relationship.
It seems like it would just drive them further away.
Exactly. So why is Paul ultimately celebrating the fact that he devastated his friends?
Because untreated wounds fester.
Ooh, that's good.
This brings us to the central thesis of the chapter, and it's the primary focus of both the NAA and Holman notes. Paul didn't want them to suffer aimlessly. He states that he rejoices not because they were made sorrowful, but because their sorrow led to repentance.
Okay.
He says they were made sorrowful according to God. He draws a razor-sharp distinction between two completely different psychological mechanisms of remorse.
Godly sorrow versus worldly sorrow.
Exactly.
Let's break down the worldly side first, because I feel like we see this everywhere in our culture today.
I really do. So the NAA notes define worldly sorrow, they call it tristeza do mundo, as remorse generated by the loss of human approval.
So it's purely horizontal.
Exactly, horizontal. The pain you feel is entirely tied to the social or material consequences of your actions being exposed.
How does that actually dictate a person's behavior, though? Like,
Yeah.
if I have worldly sorrow, what am I practically doing?
The notes explain that worldly sorrow leads to a determination to recover that earthly approval. You enter pure damage control mode. Ah, I see.
The whole goal is to manipulate the optics, pacify the angry parties, and just get your status back. Paul warns that this mechanism ultimately produces death or divine judgment.
Why?
Because it doesn't solve the underlying moral rot. It just hides it better.
Okay, think about a high-profile corporate scandal. An executive is caught embezzling funds. They go on camera, their voice is shaking, and they are openly weeping.
We've all seen that press conference.
Right, and the tears are real, the distress, the lupe is real. But they aren't crying because they suddenly developed a deep moral aversion to theft.
No, not at all.
They are crying because their stock options are gone, their reputation is totally destroyed, and they might actually go to prison. The mechanism driving their apology is pure self-preservation.
They're just trying to stop the bleeding of their own consequences.
Exactly.
That is the perfect distinction. The sorrow exists, sure, but the motivation is entirely self-centered. Now, contrast that with what the text calls tristeza segundo Deus, or godly sorrow. Okay, so how does the mechanism of godly sorrow differ from just wanting to avoid consequences?
Godly sorrow is remorse caused by the loss of God's approval. It is a vertical realization.
Vertical. Got it.
The distress comes from recognizing that you have violated a fundamental moral boundary. And this is key. It happens regardless of whether anyone else ever found out, and regardless of the social fallout.
So it's about the action itself, not the consequence.
Exactly. Because the distress is rooted in a fractured relationship with the divine, the notes explain that it leads to a determination to revert one's conduct. You actually want to change your life to align with God.
So it's not damage control. It's a fundamental internal identity shift.
Yes.
If we use that embezzling executive analogy again, godly sorrow is the executive who realizes the gravity of their theft, walks into the boardroom with all the financial records, before anyone even suspects anything, confesses, and resigns on the spot.
Yes.
They aren't trying to manage the PR at all. They're trying to repair their soul.
And the outcome of that shift is just profound. Paul writes that godly sorrow produces repentance that leads to salvation, and it leaves no regret.
Leave no regret. That is powerful.
Think about that psychology for a second. When you only have worldly sorrow, you always carry the regret of getting caught. You constantly think, man, if only I had covered my tracks better.
Right. If only I hadn't sent that email.
Exactly. But when a behavior change is driven by a genuine moral awakening, you don't regret the confession. You actually feel liberated by the truth, even if the earthly consequences are incredibly severe.
That sounds beautiful in theory.
Yeah.
But we have a huge practical problem here.
What's that?
I cannot see inside your soul.
Fair point.
If someone betrays me, right, and then comes back in tears saying they've had this massive moral awakening,
Huh?
how do I know it's godly sorrow
Yeah.
and not just a highly sophisticated worldly PR campaign? Because remember, Paul was miles away in Macedonia. How did he know the Corinthians' apology was actually genuine?
It's a great question. He knew because true repentance leaves a visible, undeniable footprint in the real world.
It leaves evidence.
Exactly. In verses 11 and 12, Paul stops talking in abstract theological terms and provides a highly concrete checklist. He points to the specific, active traits the Corinthians exhibited as a direct result of their godly sorrow.
I want to spend some time on this list because I think it is the ultimate diagnostic tool for anyone trying to figure out if an apology they've received is real. So what is the first trait?
The first is earnestness. The text says their sorrow produced a deep, serious commitment to addressing the issue. They didn't brush it off or try to minimize what happened.
He didn't just say, hey, let's just move on and forget the past.
Far from it.
Okay.
Which leads right to the second trait, an eagerness to clear themselves.
Okay.
They actively wanted to remove the stain of this betrayal from their community. They were proactive, not passive.
Now, the third one on this list in the text really caught me off guard. Indignation. Anger.
Yeah, that surprises a lot of people.
Why would a genuine apology involve anger? If I mess up and I'm asking you for forgiveness, shouldn't my posture be, like, completely humble and quiet?
You would think so, but the psychology here is fascinating. When you experience godly sorrow, you suddenly see the toxic nature of your own actions clearly.
Oh, I see.
The indignation Paul sees isn't defensive anger directed at the person they hurt. It is an internal immune response. They were angry at the sin itself. They were furious that they had allowed these false apostles to manipulate them and damage their relationship with Paul. True repentance means you actually hate the betrayal you committed.
That makes total sense. If my partner lies to me and their apology is just them shrugging and saying, yeah, my bad, I shouldn't have done that, I'm not going to trust them.
Right, there's no weight to it.
Exactly. But if they are genuinely angry at their own capacity to lie, if they are disgusted by their own actions, that tells me their internal moral compass is working again.
Exactly. It's functional.
What else did Paul see on this checklist?
He saw alarm, which is a healthy fear of the damage that had been done and a real realization of the stakes. He also saw a deep longing to restore the relationship with him.
They wanted him back.
Yes, he saw intense zeal. And finally, a desire to see justice done.
Justice, meaning they didn't just apologize with words, they took structural steps to make sure it was made right.
Yes. They actually dealt with the people who caused the offense. The NAA notes clarify a really vital point here. Paul's severe letter wasn't merely vindictive.
Right.
It wasn't just about punishing a specific offender or defending his own bruised ego. It was a diagnostic test.
A stress test for the relationship.
Yes. He needed to make their devotion to him, and ultimately their devotion to God, manifest in the real world. By exhibiting earnestness, indignation, and this drive for justice, their reaction proved they truly belonged to God.
The internal shift had produced undeniable outward evidence.
Exactly.
And the result of passing that test is a complete restoration of trust, which we see in verses 13 through 16.
The shift in the atmosphere is just immediate. Titus, who had carried all this heavy emotional weight back from Corinth, had his spirit completely refreshed by their response.
He could breathe again.
Right. And Paul notes something very human here. He had previously boasted to Titus about how good the Corinthian community was, even before all this conflict blew up.
He talked them up.
He did. And now he is overjoyed because his boasting proved to be true.
He didn't look like a fool for believing in them when things got hard.
He didn't. Titus now remembers their obedience with what the text calls fear and trembling.
There's that word fear again.
Yeah, but the NAA notes bring us full circle here, explaining that fear and trembling describes their profound, reverent seriousness in responding to the call for reconciliation. They didn't treat the repair process casually.
They treated it like a sterile operating room.
Yes. Perfect throwback. And because they engage the process with that level of gravity, Paul concludes the entire chapter with an incredibly powerful statement. He rejoices because he has complete confidence in them.
I want to pause on that conclusion
Not them.
because I feel like it completely flips our standard script on how human relationships work.
It really does.
Most of us view conflict as a permanent tear in the fabric of a relationship, right?
Yeah, like a crack in a glass that never really goes away.
Exactly. If there is friction, we assume the bond is permanently weakened. We avoid having the hard conversations. We avoid sending the severe letter because we are terrified that applying pressure will shatter whatever fragile piece we have left.
We tiptoe around the real issues.
I do. But look at the mechanics of what actually happened here. A severe confrontation, which caused deep temporary emotional anguish that Lupe did not destroy the relationship.
No, it saved it.
It created a level of unshakable trust that simply did not exist beforehand. Paul trusts the Corinthians more after they betrayed him, faced the agonizing truth, and actively repaired it than he would have if they had just maintained some polite surface-level peace where their loyalty was never actually tested.
The conflict was the crucible that actually forged the trust. It is an anti-fragile relationship.
Yes, anti-fragile. The pressure literally made it stronger.
And, if we pull this ancient text into our current reality, it forces a rather uncomfortable reflection.
No, for sure.
We live in a culture that is highly allergic to friction. When someone messes up, the immediate instinct is either to cancel them and completely sever the relationship to avoid the discomfort.
Or we demand an empty, perfectly focus grouped PR apology just so the tension dissipates and everyone can go back to scrolling.
Exactly. We settle for worldly sorrow because it is faster and requires way less of us emotionally.
It demands far less effort to just accept the fake apology.
It does. But this text challenges us to reevaluate how we view deep, uncomfortable sorrow. It suggests that the distress, the difficult confrontation, the demand for tangible change, it's not a toxic force we need to run away from.
Right.
It is the only genuine gateway to indestructible trust. Real reconciliation requires a period of distress. You have to look at the ugly truth together.
You can't bypass it.
If we constantly run away from that friction or paper over it with cheap apologies, we never get to experience the profound, resilient joy that Paul and the Corinthians ultimately reached.
That is a phenomenal thought to leave you with as you reflect on the sources we covered today. In our desperate rush to keep every interaction smooth and painless and comfortable, are we actually avoiding the very friction that could save our most important relationships?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is a demanding question, but it just might be the key to finding out who you can truly trust. Well, thank you for joining us as we unpack the psychology of conflict, apology, and repair. It is always a privilege to explore these deep waters with you. God blesses all the listeners. Take care of yourselves, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.